hotter the conflict, the greater the triumph.
A theist serpent may be overcome by a swarm of ants.
Lead me, follow me, or get out of my way. Age wrinkles the body, quitting wrinkles the soul.
Battle buddies.
Battle buddies.
Batman.
But were you a comic book kid growing up?
No. I
No.
liked him,
Yeah.
but like we didn't have like a good shop, and then it would be like expensive, and so my parents would be like, "We're not actually doing that." I like every year I'd get a couple from like my cousin.
Because I was gonna ask you, like, did comic books like affect your behavior?
No.
Do you think comic books do affect kids' behavior? Like in a moment, would they be like, "What would Captain America do in this situation?" Is that a thing?
Okay, I lied. My when the Scholastic Book Fair would come to
The
town,
best.
I would get Calvin and Hobbes, and
Yeah, I love Calvin and
I
Hobbes.
read so much fucking Calvin and Hobbes, and it really did open up my imagination for how like solo playing could be, like in terms of
Yeah.
like how far I could push
Oh, interesting.
my games. Because I'd always like build like these little like space operas essentially with my Legos,
That's cool.
and then after Calvin and Hobbes, like I could push this further, like I could make this crazy. Because in those comic strips, some of them would get wild, and they'd be like pages of his just imagination. I'm
Yeah,
like,
quite imaginative.
okay, you can push yourself further on like
Mhm.
on just this idea of playing, which I really liked.
Yeah. Kevin's who's in the Super Bowl this year?
Ah, damn it! I asked Hannah this morning, so I wouldn't seem dumb.
Did she tell you?
Yeah,
She knows.
yeah, because it's the 49ers.
Yep.
And Taylor Swift's boyfriend,
Yeah, and he's on the.
Chiefs.
Yay!
There you go.
Are you coming over for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Battle Buddies. We are continuing our journey into the Masters of the Air book, whilst also the show is
Yeah.
happening as we speak. So,
They're all great.
yeah, they are. So far, so good. As we speak, I think only 3 episodes are out, and I'm going to be covering chapters 7 and 8 of the book, and that is kind of a lot of episode 3 of the show. At least I think.
Even a little bit of episode 2.
Yeah.
Because they talk about why the British and Americans didn't hang out together when they went to bars and stuff.
Yeah.
All that comes up.
Definitely.
But this whole episode is really about the difference between ball bearings and slide bearings. Take it away, Spencer.
That's funny.
That's a real part of
it's
the book.
a Masters of the Air joke.
Yeah,
Like,
it's really boring.
yeah,
But it's important.
It is important. It is very important. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, open up your phone, rate and review us, por favor.
Please.
That would be great.
Thank you to our new Patreon subscribers.
Ron. You're man. You're the man.
Fucking love you, Ron.
Yes, thank you for subscribing to our Patreon. We
Being on our
fucking
show.
love you. He'll be on again.
Yeah.
He ain't going anywhere. Other than that, should we get into it?
Let's do it.
Alrighty then. The Bells of Hell. Oh, did I do that wrong?
Now do it.
Is it this button? There we go.
Look at that plane.
That looks right. Alright, so we are at Thorpe Abbott's on June 25th of 1943.
Thor Abbott, the base.
Yes, sir. In, I believe, England?
Europe.
Europe. Yeah.
You're getting the hard
That
facts here, friends.
Really narrows it down. All right, so the 100th Air Force woke up bright and early this morning. Today was a big day because today, the 100th was about to give a major blow to the city of Bremen in Germany. That morning, 17 planes went out and 14 came back in. The mechanics that worked tirelessly to make sure the aircrafts were in tip-top shape became extremely somber when some of the planes didn't make it back. The unsung heroes of this war are definitely the mechanics.
Dude.
They would immediately work on planes when they arrived and wouldn't get off until the work was done. The show does a good job of also pointing that out.
They did a good job because it's hard to show it, like, and they did it right because they didn't have them really talking.
Yeah.
But when Miller's describing it, they just like eat in silence and they just sit there and then they just smoke
Super intense.
or try to sleep and then they just sit on the runway and wait. And I don't know. A lot of respect for those people.
Absolutely,
for being
dude.
committed.
Literally, shout out to the mechanics
Yeah.
as we speak in the military, dude. You guys are fucking dope. If it weren't for mechanics, there wouldn't be machines.
Anyone who worked on Ron Stryker, thank you for getting him home.
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Our buddy's a combat mechanic, or was a combat mechanic.
No big
We
deal.
were just talking about that.
Yeah. Now, Nazi Germany used to refer to the United States as a country filled with mechanics. They knew that young men were being recruited from rural areas of the country where 15-year-olds knew how to fix their dad's Chevy trucks. Our boy Curtis LeMay showed up to Thorpe Abbott's to help whip the gentleman back into a state of discipline and order. Shout out to 12 O'Clock High. The men's living quarters were filled with dirty laundry and bottles of whiskey. The general of the base was a football coach at West Point and drank with his men and let them fight. He knew that the trauma that they endured would foster an unconventional way of blowing off some steam.
Yeah, he was a populist. He was
Yes.
He was a very famous, I think, at that time, like college football player.
Yep.
So he was a man of the people.
Yeah, 100%.
And he wasn't gonna go into their barracks and tell them how to live.
I personally feel like if I were a general, this is kind of how I would be. And I'm not saying that this is the right way to be, but I think that is how my personality
It's why we would not be good generals.
Yes.
Because we seek
Gotta
to not
drink.
actively seek to not control situations, and
100%.
that's not a good general.
No, it's not. It's not. Now, on one particular mission over Germany, a bunch of men opened the bomb doors for a solid target they saw over Bonn, Germany. A gentleman came over the radio and said, "Hold your fire, don't drop bombs. We will wait for another target. We can't hit Bonn." The pilot comes over and says, "Why not?" "Well," he said, "that's where Beethoven was from. It was considered one of the most beautiful parts of Europe." This is interesting to me.
Yep. Well, and do you know who said it? It was fucking Crosby, the guy in the show, the navigator from the show, because he was listening to the Fifth or whatever it was, Beethoven's Fifth, the night before, and was reading the back of the vinyl because that's what you do. It's fun.
Yeah, it's physical
we miss
music.
that with streaming.
Absolutely,
It's
100%.
I love certain songs and they're streaming and then they go away and I forget about them. But when you listen to it on vinyl, you sit there and you read it and then you listen to it and you're like taking it in. He was doing that.
I love physical music.
Yep.
Yeah. So I wrote that. I added this because I just think that's super fucking interesting that you have these characters in history like Genghis Khan and Alexander the Great and all these other people that were known to destroy things as they went through cities. And it's interesting that these Americans were like, dude, we can't bomb that.
Right.
Like there's like some legitimate world history here. And that's just what a civilized thing to do.
Yeah, they were trying.
They were trying.
It's crazy too. We don't think about it so much anymore unless you're taking like 17th century and 18th century classes, but so much of the world's culture, especially for Western Europe, came from this Austria, this Germany in those time periods. A lot of our modern thinking is going to come from that, and a lot of our modern culture, like from music and art, is all coming from like Vienna and stuff. Like these are that's why Hitler went there. You know, he was trying to sell stuff, like work as a person there, and it's interesting that
it's extremely interesting
because it's so hard. It's so harshly colorized by the Nazis,
right?
But before that, it was different.
Yes, yeah.
Fuck you, Nazis.
Fuck the Nazis, dude. Hamburg. Can you point to Hamburg? It's like up there, kind of. Hamburg. Now, Hamburg did not share the same luck that Bonn did. The 100th absolutely obliterated Bonn, creating one of the first firestorms in recorded history. In July of 1943, the Air Force opened up with what they called Blitz Week, which is a fancy way of saying bombing the ever-loving shit out of Germany.
Yeah.
Yep, it's coming.
Oh, is this Hamburg?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. On July 24th, the 8th Air Force joined and marked the largest aerial attack in history at that point in time. The 8th Air Force was conducting strategic bombings targeting aircraft engine plants, U-boat construction yards, and the carnage was described as apocalyptic. 3 days later, on July 27th, over 700 British bombers made their way into German airspace to unleash hell on the oppositional force of the United States. The German citizens on the ground could not escape the fire moving throughout the streets at a speed of 150 miles per hour. People's clothes were literally just incinerated right off their backs. And those who made their way to the rivers and creek beds were safe for a while until the water became inundated with oil and lit ablaze after hours of saturation. The German civilians who made it to an air raid shelter had no chance of escaping pure torture. Children were burned alive, with the screams haunting bystanders for the rest of their lives. One woman cut her child's wrists, and then her own, and then her own, screaming that they will meet their dad in heaven. Children's bodies lay in the street with burst temples and brains seeping through their burnt skulls. It was a scene out of hell, or perhaps worse.
It was the Hamburg shit's fucked up. And for people that haven't studied anything on firebombing, I think the hardest pill of it to swallow is that that's intentional. You know, when you firebomb, you specifically try to make it so that there's enough heat to burn off the oxygen and literally in the atmosphere to suffocate people, and then to create a firestorm. And the thing that you have to do, which is the fucked up part I didn't realize, I knew about that, right? I knew about that you build a firestorm, you burn the oxygen, it's all fucked up. But I didn't realize part of the bombing strategy is also to put enough holes in the ground to stop fire trucks from getting to the fire fast enough so that it can erupt. It's that malicious, I guess. I would never, if I was in charge of creating an attack, I would never think of I want to fuck up their emergency response unit.
No, yeah, not at all.
That it really creeped me out reading that part.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's really hard for us to think about now in the year 2024 is how much the world fucking hated Germany right now.
So I was just about to say, that's not trying to say that this wasn't warranted, because there are some pilots in this moment, and a couple of these other moments, that are this is pretty fucked up. But Hitler won't stop. And these people have supported this guy, and we just can't have him creating breathing room.
Right.
Which is, I don't think there's a right answer, and it's scary that we could come to a modern place without a right answer.
Perhaps. And I think that's another reason people are really just fascinated as fuck by World War II history, because they're it's just crazy that humanity got to this point.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did we get to this point? There was no way to stop it.
All right. So after August 2nd, relief workers in the form of Hitler Youth kids came in and cleaned the streets. These young kids were picking up mummified bodies and stacking them in the streets for vehicles to come by and eventually get them.
Have you watched the World War II Frontline colorized one?
Yeah.
The new Netflix one?
Yeah.
They talk about a lot of Poland kids who get essentially thrown into the Hitler Youth, and I didn't even fucking realize. Of course that's what happened. They picked all the blonde-haired little kids from the neighboring areas and just threw them into Hitler Youth for more manpower. But some of those guys end up fighting because that's, oh my God, it's
fucked up.
I don't like you, Hitler.
I don't like you,
You shouldn't be allowed to have that much charisma and use it for such evil.
Yeah. What a piece of shit. Now, this sight caused the German civilians to go fucking mad.
Yeah.
2 women were standing next to each other on a train car back to Berlin to reach safety. God. A woman noticed another patron holding a suitcase, and she told the woman how lucky she was in managing to save a suitcase. The woman opened up her suitcase, and it was a human child burnt to a crisp. The woman said, "That's my daughter. Isn't she sweet? She has such beautiful, fair hair and sweet curls. She's grown a lot this year, and she's only 12 years old. She used to be tall, but now she's burnt and shriveled. I can carry her in my suitcase now," and laughed maniacally.
Yeah.
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 So they went fucking crazy, dude. They went crazy. 45,000 were recovered dead, while 10,000 more were missing under the rubble of the bombing. 60% of the city, or 13 square miles, was completely gone.
Now, we're going to pull back on an old idea from last episode. We talked about the whole series, but last episode we were talking about it again. The whole thing with this is at the end, justify the means. And these things are supposed to just decimate Germany, and that would make it worth it. And we make so many mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, dude, but also like invading Germany on foot. How much longer would the war have lasted if we invaded on foot?
I agree. I'm just saying we're gonna get to it with the ball bearing stuff too, but we would do these bombings. It'll be a theme throughout today's episode. We're gonna do these bombings, and then we're gonna leave that town alone.
Yeah.
And it's weird that like that's the fucked up part to me.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows about strategic bombings and trying to break the will and trying to break industry, that you need to bomb it over and over again.
I just came up with something in my mind that's kind of interesting. We live in a world now when we bomb and do drone strikes and things like that, this creates more radicals.
Absolutely. That's what we've been talking about that for 2 years now.
Right. However, currently, or like that shortly thereafter, us bombing Germany, I don't feel like Germany was mad at us.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like that feels like, it's like, oh, well, they're on our side. Like, holy shit.
It enraged Hitler.
Yes.
But yeah, the rest of them they were just more mad about where Hitler was forcing them to put their anti-aircraft guns.
Right. So it's just interesting, dude.
It is interesting.
I don't know. Germany currently in the world is in an interesting spot. Like,
yes.
Nobody's hating on Germany.
No. Germany's been... Well, currently, right now, they're like potentially going to be making crazy decisions.
Oh, really?
Well, because when the Russia-Ukraine first invaded, everyone was like, is Germany about to like arm themselves? And some of the stuff I've been reading the last like month or two is that it's getting to a place where they may have to do stuff.
That's interesting.
And they don't want to.
No, of course not.
They don't want to jeopardize the goodwill that they've been maintaining.
Right.
It's wild.
Shout out to Olaf Scholz. Alrighty. Behind me, I got 3 targets that I'm going to have Kevin point at in a moment. After 6 months of planning, our boy Ira Eaker ordered a stand down on July 31st to have 2 weeks to prepare for a secret operation. The next mission for the 8th Air Force was to drop bombs on a friction-reducing ball-bearing factory. 57% of Germany's ball bearings for their planes and other machines came from this factory in Schweinfurt.
Nice pronunciation.
Thank you. Simultaneously, while they were conducting this raid... Oh, sorry.
That's my fault.
No worries. Simultaneously, while they were conducting this raid, there'd be another fortress in Messerschmitt that produced 30% of the German Air Force's single-engine fighter planes. The goal here was to confuse Germany's defenses and significantly weaken their production of fighting machines. They would also have a third target, which was 60% of Hitler's crude oil refinery in Ploiești, Romania. Churchill said himself that this was the taproot of German might. This would be like cutting the head off of the snake if they were successful. All right, let's talk about the Sky Scorpions.
Sky
for a second.
Scorpions.
Yeah, dude, the
I love
Sky
alliteration.
Scorpions. These dudes came into North Africa to practice low-level flying maneuvers. It's a big deal. The pilots said it was wild because when you're going 200 miles per hour and you're that close to the ground, you really feel like you're going 200 miles per hour. The Sky Scorpions would practice on these wooden targets that engineers mocked up to look like the Romanian oil complexes that was supplying the Nazis. So the training was solid for this shit.
Some things never change. That's literally what China's doing against us right now.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly
fucking wild.
right.
And for when we say low, they are hitting tops of trees.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes.
Like, they are as low as you can be. Mm-hmm. It's wild.
It's dangerous.
Yes.
Yeah, for all... All right, here we go. There's some photos of the low-level flying. Dude, I was able to get some good photos.
That's an amazing photo.
Yeah.
Open up your phone right now and just look at that.
Yeah. If you were watching on Spotify, we got some cool pictures here. When the Sky Scorpions were being briefed on bombing the oil complex in Romania, they were told to expect 50% losses.
Yeah.
I'm confused that they would tell them that.
It is weird.
Yeah.
Like, why did they... I
guess I actually have an answer.
Oh, what's your answer?
because at one point I'm going to get into it here, but they had to write letters to put on their
Yes.
bedding. Yeah.
I was thinking about that. I was thinking maybe the pilots were high enough rank to where they like had like a military obligation to like make sure the officers knew what was going on.
Yeah, like you got to worry about your will and preparing for that.
Right.
So that's a thing. So coming home safely was second priority in this mission. Co-pilots were given machine guns and were also expected to practice drive-by shootings, engaging with fixed gun batteries defending the oil reserve. This mission was massive, dude. It was said to have the potential to end the war by half a year. The morning of the mission, airmen were told to write a letter and put it on their bed. If they did not return, the letter would be mailed out post haste.
From their fucking priest.
Yeah.
Their priest was legit in the Sky Scorpions.
Oh yeah.
That guy was an amazing human.
Mm-hmm.
He said he was closer to that group than he was his own family.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, what a
shitty family.
He had a great family. He was writing to his brother and
I
stuff.
know. I'm just
you're
pissing. All right. Now, once in the air, 2 planes did not make it an hour in the air without plummeting to their demise. The trip to the target would take 7 hours to get to. That's one thing that we don't really remember, like we don't think about as we're reading this or when we're watching this show. These dudes are flying for a really long time.
for hours. And the way that they could do it, I guess, is on the... They were supposed to fly in the B-17s, right? But I think they're flying B-24s.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to username DBFlyGuy. But I think what they were doing is they put new fuel, like little, I don't know, tanks inside the wings that would extend how long they could fucking fly for.
It's wild.
But I think they flew B-24s, and that was a huge issue for them, as we'll see.
Yeah.
B-24s suck. B-17s are dope.
B-17s are the one, for sure. Now, upon seeing the mountains of Albania, one navigator made a wrong turn and brought a bunch of planes with him in the process. Pilots were ordered to turn around and attack the target at will once the target was in sight. Nothing could go wrong.
The whole point of this mission, guys, is that they all had an exact timer of when they all needed to be over their target dropping the bomb for this to work. It would not work if they did something like fire at will.
Correct.
Which is then immediately what their call is. And the Germans see them from North Africa, right? I think they get spotted.
Oh, yes.
When they initially leave 7 hours early from their secret mission.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
So if you open up your phone and check this out, on the left we have the planned PLOSD attack, like what they were briefed on how they were going to do it. And then on the right, the reality of what actually happened. So kind of interesting.
My lesson, what I think how my lesson is going to go, and then how my lesson really goes.
It's a teacher joke. All right. About 35 minutes from Ploesti, the plane started to descend to the tree line to begin the Battle of Ploesti. Anti-aircraft fire started pummeling the planes. The Luftwaffe did an amazing job building up the oil refinery with an impressive defensive fortress. There were machine guns and cannons on rooftops eagerly awaiting the United States or any allied powers to float through their airspace and engage in target practice. Yo, the Germans' defense is fucking incredible.
It's that guy, I forget the guy's name, but it was one German leader who essentially just didn't tell anybody that he was going to make this the most fortified place in all of Germany, essentially.
I believe I say his name in a bit,
Okay.
But I could be wrong.
He's
But yeah,
wild.
He's brilliant.
He is. He knew that it was going to get attacked, and no one else saw it. They all, at this time, and especially right after these attacks, Hitler is going to start freaking out he's going to start taking over leadership roles in areas he shouldn't, and he's going to be like, Berlin needs to be defended, and he's a big old dummy for that. But this guy is
As you can tell from the picture behind me, those are legit the oil refineries right there.
Absolutely.
Isn't that fucking crazy?
Looks like Martinez.
It does. Now, there were massive steel wires being held up by these thick balloons in the hopes that a plane wing would catch one and split through it like butter. The Ploesti bombing mission quickly turned into a Nazi ambush. The oil refinery was being masked by thick, greasy smoke to impede the visibility of the Americans. It worked. Nobody could see where the hell they should drop bombs. 60% of the factories producing ball bearings were destroyed, but the oil refineries were not as badly bruised. The lack of motivation to return immediately allowed for the Nazis to rebuild. The refinery wouldn't be hit until April of 1944. It's almost a year.
That's what I'm alluding to earlier is because we are not bombing the same targets to make sure that they can't rebuild. They just keep rebuilding.
Yeah.
And then it becomes, if the end justifies the means and you don't get the end, then are you not justified by your definition?
Right. I think the biggest thing is that they go up on these missions, they lose a fuck ton of people,
Yeah,
and they're like,
seriously.
we can't go back. It's like hard to justify.
I know,
Yeah.
because later in one of the missions, they realize that there's no veterans left. It's all green recruits.
Yeah.
And there's like a heavy quote that one of the guys has where it's like, and we're no longer a family. You know, because it's all new kids.
Right.
So they lost all continuity and like meaning. Ugh.
God, it would be like at work, wherever wherever you work, it would be like if all your work buddies just up and bounced and you had like a completely new crew. It would change your
It
work
changed
day.
everything.
Yeah, it would change a lot. So 310 Americans were killed, 130 injured, and over 100 became prisoners of war in the Ploesti raid.
Oh, that's right.
Only 33 of the 178 planes that went out came back with no damage. This was the only time in World War II history air raids that more pilots died or got injured than civilians.
That's crazy.
That's fucking gnarly. This was also the only air raid where 5 Congressional Medals of Honor were awarded. Behind me, you got Kane and Johnson, and they were 2 of the 5 awarded. As you can see this is actually a funny little thing. I zoomed in on this picture. Under the gentleman's arm,
yeah.
is he's the dude who made the wrong turn. Those are
really?
That's his map.
Oh,
like,
shit.
Like, you fucked up. Anyway. All right, the double strike. Now, just to get oriented again. Is that right? Did I say that right? Oriented? That's right?
Orientalism?
Strategery. Back to the other 2 bombings at Regensburg and Schweinfurt. Much like Ploesti, this mission was dependent on secrecy and timing.
This is the fucked up one.
Yeah.
In terms of secret, like, God.
So, can you point to the Regensburg one on the bottom there? It's like in the middle. The one, yep, that's Regensburg. You got Schweinfurt north, and then Ploesti was down here in Romania. All right. Now, quick shout out to the Warfare History Network website. I've been getting a lot of images from each of these raids, and this website is to thank. These images are fucking stunning.
Yeah.
So I'll drop a link to this website in our bio for this episode. On August 17th, the 8th Air Force woke up at 1:30 a.m. and were briefed on their target over Regensburg. If they were to be successful, they'd be eliminating 30% of the production for Germany's single-engine aircrafts. The intelligence officer giving their morning briefing also gave the folks going out to Schweinfurt their targets. The Schweinfurt target was a factory that produced most of Germany's ball bearings. Without it, they'd impede all the engines running in Germany. This is a massive fucking target. After the mission, bombers were ordered to fly down the Alps rather than turn back home and land in North Africa. They'd have to fly through Germany's heavily defended airspace. For those of you who are listening, if you've seen episode 3, the intelligence officer gives a briefing. He literally holds up a ball bearing, and you get to see what they look like. It's pretty cool. The plan was as follows. 146 bombers would fly into Regensburg first, with 230 Schweinfurt bombers taking off minutes later. The 2 air formations would look as though they are going to the same target until they would split apart over the air defenses, trying to confuse Germany. LeMay's Regensburg forces would take the brunt of the counteroffensive, allowing the Schweinfurt bombers to enter the battle space with minimal resistance. LeMay and his men would fly through the Alps, landing in North Africa, while the Schweinfurt forces would turn back and go to England. LeMay would fight his way in, and the Schweinfurt planes would fight their way out. All right, now.
It's a clever, terrible idea.
Well,
It's an egghead idea.
So here we go. We're going to get into this, all right? So, at the Bomber Command headquarters in High Wycombe, 38-year-old Frederick Anderson, the 8th new bombardment commander, had to make the most difficult decision of his life. He had 3 choices, so let's go over these choices. All right. This is directly from the book.
Well, because right now they can't take off because the weather's England.
Yeah.
The weather's always bad.
The weather's England, yes.
It's just England. So it's not going to plan already, and it's like 7 a.m.
Correct. So, option 1. Cancel the mission and risk losing for perhaps as long as 2 weeks the ideal weather conditions that prevailed from the coast of Holland all the way to Africa. Okay? Cancel. Option 2. Damn the English weather and send out both forces at the same time, with the risk of losing a great number of bombers in mid-air collisions. Option 3. Send the Regensburg force, which had to leave within the hour in order to make it to Africa by nightfall, and hold the Schweinfurt force until weather cleared over its bases. Anderson chose the third option. Spoiler alert, this was the worst option by like a lot.
And when he's saying Africa, this mission is such an egghead mission because it's like a Washington mission that they made, right?
Yes.
It's like there's like a council, and
Yes.
they came up with all, and like, we're gonna split the attack, and so they're gonna attack, and then half the forces they'll just swing around for 8 hours back to Africa, and then now they'll join the African offensive because like, isn't that super efficient, guys? We made everything look perfect.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, it's great. No issues here.
Luckily, they'll have plenty of gas to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing goes wrong. The Schweinfurt forces waited 3.5 hours after the Regensburg forces left. LeMay's forces were hit hard, and it gave the Luftwaffe time to regroup and hit the Schweinfurt planes as well.
Yeah.
Why did Anderson choose to send the Regensburg force without the Schweinfurt force following closely behind?
That's the question, right?
Well, Washington was damn near calling the shots. Washington, D.C. is the answer. Bunch of fucks in suits behind desks pushed the mission to prove that daylight bombings could happen with minimal escorts and succeed in doing so. Washington was hell-bent on the idea that a Germany without ball bearings is a Germany without machines.
Essentially, they had like Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Because they had a bunch of civilian CEOs and a couple military guys in a room, and they just like, I came up with a cool idea.
Yeah. It's one of the most frustrating things about pretty much anything on this planet is a bunch of people not doing something, give you an idea, or give you an order on doing things when they aren't there doing it.
Yeah, and they're not previously, like, I understand the ethos argument of, like, you were the pilot forever, but no one's ever done this type of warfare before.
Exactly.
And it's changing every day, and no one is willing to change with it, and I don't get that part.
That's why LeMay is LeMay is important, because he was in the fucking plane.
Yeah, LeMay is... We were talking about LeMay before we started recording, because he's kind of polarizing. He's kind of an asshole, like on purpose. But he is out there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And
He's technically leading from the front.
yeah, I have respect for LeMay.
I do too.
A lot.
He's obviously not perfect, but
But he's trying to...
none of these guys are.
He's trying to do it.
Yes. Yes. All right.
And was he the one... Did he get talked into a different plane so that he wouldn't potentially explode, and then that plane that he was supposed to be in explodes?
I know what story you're talking about. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if that was LeMay.
It's hard. There's so many stories.
There's
almost exactly like that.
Yeah. All right. The Regensburg force took off at 7:30 a.m. and made their way toward the target. When the fortress reached 300 miles outside of their target, all hell broke loose. German planes aimed for the rear groups, the 95th and the 100th bombardment groups. 6 fortresses were blown out of the sky. The Regensburg force would be receiving incoming fire from the Germans all the way to their target.
Yeah.
The enemy knew that they were going to the heart of Germany. Germany fucking knew what they were trying to do. Planes were being ripped to shreds. One plane in particular had its entire nose gone and was still able to fly. Check this fucking picture out.
Crazy.
Isn't that an incredible photo?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
He landed that.
And imagine being in it.
Yeah.
After an hour and a half of fighting, LeMay's men finally had the target in their sights.
Wait, you would have to tell me, you'd have to convince me I wasn't dead. If I was the pilot
totally.
and the wind's blowing on me like this, I'm like, the front of my plane's gone, like, I'm dead right now.
We're gonna die.
I'm already dead.
Yeah,
This is the afterlife. I'm transitioning.
This is just DMT spewing into my
This is exactly
brain.
what I'm like.
I'm tripping.
Can you prove to me I'm not a ghost?
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Yeah, dude.
No way. No way am I believing that I'm still here. Like, I'm the lucky one. The nose is gone on my plane, and like, that's fine.
Whoever landed this got laid.
Yeah.
That night. All right. After an hour and a half of fighting, LeMay's men finally had the target in their sights. They opened the bay doors, dropped the bombs, and headed toward the snow-capped Alps. Planes landed in North Africa 6.5 hours later with their fuel gauges on empty. If you have watched the 3rd episode, spoiler alert, they come into Africa and literally have to just glide. Like
Jeez.
they have no fuel left.
Yeah.
It's really it's a cool scene. Once the midday sun had burned off England's fog, the Schweinfurt force finally took off to do some daytime bombings. When the force arrived near Schweinfurt, the men quickly learned that the idea to send fortresses without escorts was a highly illogical and fucking dumb move. The Germans had far more pilots with them. LeMay saw more than double the size of the German Luftwaffe in the sky that day. The amount of Germans in the sky literally made the men in the 8th Air Force abandon their crafts in mass. It looks like the Americans were doing a paratrooper raid in Germany.
The Luftwaffe, and they were in Germany, so the Luftwaffe would fight. They would be able to fight and use all their ammunition and then land.
That's right.
And then they'd get more ammunition.
Yeah.
They'd fly back into the air. Which, once you're talking about refueling planes, like, what fucking chance do you have?
Yep. Escorts. They needed escorts.
They needed escorts. We talked about that's where we left all that stuff in last on part 3 about Arnold knowing it, right? We read that memo that he had that he knew they needed escorts.
Yep.
The data was there pretty early on.
Yeah. It's a fucking shame. The bombing of Schweinfurt was a massive pile of ambiguity. The men who survived had no idea if it was a win or a loss. For those who don't know, if you have to ask yourself that, chances are you fucking lost.
You definitely didn't win.
Right. The English newspapers would report that Regensburg was a massive success. Schweinfurt, on the other hand, was massively inaccurate. The main success of the Schweinfurt was the bombing of the factory that was making the Messerschmitt 262, which looks like this.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember playing Battlefield World War II back in the day, and I remember I got like an expansion, and I was like, there were jets in World War II? Like, what? And yeah, Germany was in the process of making jets.
Von Braun made the V-2 rocket.
Werner.
And we, luckily, liked that Nazi, and so he helped us get to the moon. And he was on Disney Channel shows.
He was... What?
He was on some Disney stuff.
Really?
Like... Yeah, I think on some advertisements for like Disneyland or something back in the day.
What the fuck?
Dude, he was like...
Is this why people say Walt Disney's a Nazi sympathizer?
It probably is related to it. So Operation Paperclip, when us taking the Nazis we thought had value before the Nuremberg trials and everything, so we took him and then we put him in charge of NASA. I don't know if he was in charge of the whole thing or just was secretly in charge of it all.
Wow, I did not
know
that.
Project Paperclip is like... It's not great.
No, it's not. All right. Historians seem to agree that the Allied forces should have continued hitting Schweinfurt and brought Germany's production to a standstill. But the logic is that the losses of the 8th Air Force was just too goddamn much.
Yeah.
Continuing to hit the same spot after taking that many casualties would have technically been inhumane. All right, let's watch that video if we can, please.
These are the gutted ruins of Schweinfurt, one of the most heavily attacked and bitterly defended cities in the entire Nazi industrial complex. To Allied planners aiming at destruction of the Luftwaffe and the slowing up of enemy war production, Schweinfurt was a #1 priority target. Here were manufactured the ball bearings, without which neither aircraft nor machinery could operate. In a two-pronged strike on 17th August 1943, the AAF carried out its first heavy strategic attack against Germany. Major objective for that day was destruction of the ball bearing plants at Schweinfurt. On 14th October, we struck again. Subsequent attacks continued until the following spring. The Nazi offered fanatic resistance. Our losses for the first 2 missions alone were 90 bombers. But by April 1944, the Nazis had lost an industry.
The Nazis had lost an industry. It's a cool way to put that.
Yeah, if it was true.
All right. The Germans definitely won these particular raids as far as defensively speaking.
Yeah.
Hitler was not upset, though. He blamed the Luftwaffe chief of staff.
Oh, yeah, the guy who like threw down his medal and stuff?
No, that's later.
Oh, that's later,
that's coming. This dude was had so much shame that he put a bullet in his brain. He killed himself.
Even though he like saved Nazi Germany, essentially.
Dude, a lot of, much like, you know, the guy that was on our show about the Napoleon podcast.
Yep.
Hitler had a lot of really good generals, dude.
He did.
Like, he had a lot of really, really smart
We had a
people.
lot of, like, leftovers from World War I think, that kind of kept everything
He himself
going.
was a leftover.
But he wasn't an officer that was crushing and learning things. He did, after World War I, like, work for an officer to try to root out, like, potential communists and stuff. But until he went to a Nazi gathering and was like, that's kind of cool, and then joined them.
That's kind of cool.
He was supposed to, like, root them out, and then was like, I think I could use this.
Yeah. Yikes.
What if he didn't get assigned that meeting that day?
Then Hitler would have been so cool.
Or nothing, which would have been the fucking best.
Yeah, or nothing. Yeah, the world would be double the population. All right, so this air raid changed the narrative in Washington and in generals' mouths after a couple glasses of whiskey. The main question now was, are daytime air raids actually worth the risk?
I don't know what they achieve by forcing it to be daytime anymore. It's supposed to be the targeting, right?
For 100%.
But aren't we like missing most of our targets? I mean, we're hitting some stuff, and we are doing some damage, but...
So I think my biggest, if I was a general, I'd be like, y'all realize that like the weather is such shit anyway.
Yeah.
Like, might as well do nighttime stuff.
I don't feel like there's no evidence that I've seen, and so there could be evidence. And if you know better sources, please send them our way.
Please.
Of them like looking at the data of like how the RAF is bombing and then how we are bombing and like who is being more successful. Like, how many times are we canceling because of weather? And just shit like that could really, I think, speak to someone like actually trying to do the calculus. You know, I'm like, all right, is this worth it?
Yeah.
Because Miller talks about grim calculus a lot, which I really appreciate him saying. And it's where, you know, you have to do the math. Like, how many guys do we lose? You know, how many do we take out? How much do we slow it down? Okay, is this worth it?
Right.
But I don't see any evidence that they're doing it about daytime versus nighttime. I see an ego that says daytime's right.
Correct. I see a bunch of people in Washington, D.C. saying we're going to do daytime bombing.
Or we already committed to it. We don't want to look dumb.
Yeah, that actually might be it, dude. Because the British were like, you guys are dumb.
Yeah.
Like, the British were correct.
They were, absolutely.
Yeah.
The fact that they had to have, in Master Theater, the show, they had to have Bucky say that. You're like, that's how, like, obvious it is that we have to retcon pilots to say it. Just so that they look intelligent.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Bonkers. Did they have, in this mission, that last mission that they were just flying, was Nazi Germany using those like missile defenses yet? Or is that at the beginning in chapter 8? So one thing, listeners, that Nazis are also starting to figure out is they can't use their V2 rocket stuff. Like that's like their Ubermech or whatever. That's not Ubermech, but their revenge weapons of Hitler.
Yeah.
But they did figure out how to use like some short rockets. They'd shoot it up, and then it would explode, and it would be twice as much flak in a given area.
Yes.
And those start ripping through the planes because it stops you from being able to fly in that tight little grouping.
We're going to talk about that.
Okay. That shit is bad.
It's gnarly.
Yeah.
It's bad. Yeah, for sure. All right. Chapter 8, Men at War. That's a cool old-timey map behind me. East Anglia, September 6th, 1943. On September 6th, the 8th Air Force tried bombing a ball bearing plant in Stuttgart, Germany, and lost so many planes and men that Ira Eaker decided maybe nighttime bombing is worth a try. Daytime bombing was just proving to be literally suicide.
Yeah.
Like, dudes, literally in this last chapter, like we were just talking about, dudes were jumping out of the planes when they just saw the enemy.
Yeah.
So the 8th would help the Royal Air Force do night raids, and it was considered a success, although it was hard to tell since there was such a dense fog over Europe in September. On October 8th, the 8th Air Force would conduct a second Blitz Week, which would later be referred to as Black Week, which isn't just Black Friday for a week.
It's definitely not Black History Month.
That's not that either. The losses that week only negatively impacted the statistics that airmen would not return to base after taking off on their air raids. On October 14th, the target was yet again Schweinfurt. Miller wrote this. I'm quoting the book precisely here. The pilot of the lead group of the 8th Air Force mission number 115 was J. Kemp McLaughlin of Charleston, West Virginia. This was the same J. Kemp McLaughlin who, a year earlier, had flown his maiden mission to Lille, a mission on which his commanding officer had turned coward in the plane. We talk about that in our earlier episodes. This time, McLaughlin was flying with a rock-steady veteran, Colonel Bud Peasley, air commander of the entire Schweinfurt mission. Together, they would lead over 300 heavies to the Franconian city where so many of their friends had died.
It's pretty intense. 300 heavies.
It's wild.
And heavies, that means either, as far as we understand, that means B-17s and B-24s.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're just kind of grouping those all in. Because Germany, and this is an issue for Germany, they don't have heavies. They don't have something on the level of B-17s or B-24s. They only have those light bombers.
Yeah, but they also have the Junker 88s behind me. Talking about Germany, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So on the first mission over Schweinfurt, the Germans had used planes called Junker 88s. These planes were another source of German engineering that made fighting the Luftwaffe fucking terrifying. The Junker 88s were capable of launching 250-pound missiles from tubes suspended beneath the wings called stovepipes by the Germans. This capability decimated the Allies at Münster, and would certainly do so again over Schweinfurt. The impact of these bombs would not slowly crumble the American planes, it would explode on impact, giving the pilot no chance to evade or land safely. These things would fucking just implode and explode. It was insane.
They very much remind me of like torpedoes, like 1,000 yards to arm, and then it'll explode at 2,000 yards or something.
Yeah.
Whatever that kind of math is.
It's
brutal.
Meant to eliminate the enemy.
And it's new. This is novel.
Mm-hmm.
Because at this point, flying in tight little bombardment combat wings is really useful because it helps you bomb the same target and it helps you have overlapping fields of fire in case against the Luftwaffe. And so is the best strategy. But all of a sudden, if these things are just exploding at very specific distances, all of a sudden you got to move and break off. Yeah. Well, they're not ready for that. It's just, I felt so bad for the pilots.
It changes things.
Because on the fly, they had to be like, all right, now we have to do the thing we don't want to do and go solo and hope we can take off Luftwaffe by ourselves, which they can't.
Yeah. Scary. The American B-17s miraculously hit the target over Schweinfurt, but lost 60 bombers in the process. I'm going to quote
crazy.
It's fucking gnarly, dude. I'm going to be quoting Miller again here. Black Thursday was the greatest air engagement up to that time. Not just a raid, but a titanic struggle between two large and murderous air armies. One with 229 bombers and the other with over 300 fighters. The battle line extended for over 800 miles, and the action was continuous for 3 hours and 14 minutes. Only 33 American bombers landed without battle damage, and there were 642 casualties among the 2,900 crewmen, over 18% of the force.
That's crazy. Losing a fifth of your force? A fifth?
It's wild.
everybody lost people that they knew that they were close with, right? Like I'm just thinking morale wise, like
it's not good.
1/5 of your force.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about morale here in a second,
Jesus.
but it's bad. Hitler and Göring were pissed about the outcome. They chalked it up to a lack of German bravery.
Fucking Göring.
At one meeting with Göring and Adolf Galland became furious and took off his Knight's Cross and slammed it on the table. He didn't wear any war medals for the rest of the war to show a lack of pride with their losses. It's very German.
That's a very German thing.
It's very German.
Well, and that cross is interesting because that's not a Nazi thing. That's a remnant of World War I stuff.
Yeah, it's a Knight's Cross.
The Iron Cross.
It's actually pretty cool.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
It shows that he was smart and fearless and...
bravery.
Yeah.
For those of you who are watching this plane over me, most of its left wing is gone.
Yeah, right after the engine, it's just gone.
Fucking wild, dude. Now, the raid over Schweinfurt was so traumatic for the 8th Air Force that the higher-ups were mentally preparing for a revolt or a strike on going up again. Men would rather be court-martialed for failing to obey an order rather than go up in the air and slowly die by the hand of the Luftwaffe.
That's right. There's a few gunners that they were able to quote at this time that are saying, like, I'm never going back up again. Like, I'm never doing that.
Check this out. So I had to add this one, okay? This is directly from Miller, and it goes a little something like this. It's a story that circulated of an airman trying to land a plane.
I know.
Dude, this is crazy, right? Okay, so someone on the plane radioed the tower. Hello, Lazy Fox. This is G for George calling Lazy Fox. Would you give me landing instructions, please? Pilot and co-pilot dead. 2 engines feathered. Fire in the radio room. Vertical stabilizer gone. No flaps. No brakes. Crew bailed out. Bombardier flying the ship. Give me landing instructions. The reply came in a few seconds later. I hear you, G for George. Here are your landing instructions. Repeat slowly. Please, repeat slowly. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Gave them their last rites.
Yeah. Well, okay, because that's like, I think Miller was saying that never probably happened exactly like that, but that's what was going around.
It might as well have.
Well, and so it reminds me of like myths that we know of in our world. It's like, it's not probably as big of a myth as like, if the teacher isn't here in the first 5 minutes, everyone can leave the classroom. Remember that one?
Right.
But
right.
I think it definitely shows you the feelings that they're having, like, or the climate, like that would be the story to tell each other, is like how bad it is for us and like how much support they're getting.
Yeah. You know how stories circulate and they just become emboldened and embellished over time.
I know, and no one gets to, like, kids don't get to know that anymore. But like when we went to middle school, every kid in middle school across the country learned the same myth that Marilyn Manson removed his ribs so that he could suck his own dick. And like every middle school boy learned that from between 2000 and 2005. And there was no internet really to push that narrative along. It was word of mouth. And I find it pretty amazing.
Yeah, dude.
That it went all the way to Maine and back.
Yeah. Some like young, complicated monkeys
Yeah.
figured out how to spread this rumor. Alrighty.
I almost said Charles Manson instead of
Marilyn?
Yeah.
Charles, yeah, different
Manson.
For sure. The bombing of Schweinfurt had apparently been a success according to the intelligence on the ground. 67% of the ball bearing plant had been hit. However, Germany was now involving neutral countries in the matter and started buying ball bearings from Switzerland, if you can believe it. At this point in the book, Miller discusses the difference between what people believed at the time and what we now know, with hindsight being 2020. Main takeaway: neither side was necessarily winning at this point. Both the Americans and the Germans were hurting each other equally. The Army Air Force generals kept sending planes up in the sky because they had to justify Washington's request and the billions of dollars being spent on planes and training. So that's kind of like, for those of you listening who don't like to read really long books, I really summarized like 15
Yeah,
pages.
there's a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah, I really was able to summarize the idea that like we're basically we didn't at the time we didn't fucking know.
Yeah.
If like who was winning. We truly didn't.
No.
Which is stressful.
It is stressful.
Yeah.
And well, because it goes back to that comment that Eker made that I kept in from part 3, where he said the person who wins this is going to be the person who can take the losses.
Right.
The country who can sustain their losses the longest wins this.
It's called like a battle of attrition. A war of attrition, right?
Which is not what the 8th Air Force said they were going to do.
Great. All right, but behind me, I believe we got Piccadilly Square. Yeah,
Piccadilly Square.
Piccadilly Circus. Excuse me.
London.
And that's a picture at the time.
Why is London the capital of England? You know?
This is a joke.
No, it's a real thing.
Why?
Because the Romans, when they conquered them.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's legit.
They made it so that they can keep an eye on.
You've been reading Mary Beard.
Yeah. That was the Mary Beard part.
Yeah, for sure. When I learned that, I was like, holy fuck, I did not know that.
Ties back into our Gaul campaign.
Rome. All right. Miller is the author, by the way, folks. Miller now shifts to what men in the military would do in England when they wanted to blow off some steam. Men would be sent to what they called flak farms, which were old estates in southern England that nurtured the fuck out of soldiers suffering from PTSD, which I guess you can't technically call it post, because it's just currently happening. Imagine a day spa where you could request a blowjob every once in a while. England became a densely populated area, with the Allied forces roaming the streets in their free time looking for booze, fights, fun, food, and sex. For those of you who are new to Battle Buddies, go and check out episodes 23 and 48, where you will hear service members explain what overseas debauchery consists of. This shit has not really changed, folks.
No.
The military members get into this. We've been getting into the same shit for a really long time to try and relax and not think about bullshit.
Yeah, and like abusing situations. And Spencer and I were talking about it today, because it's literally in every battle that we've ever studied so far in the last 2 years. It's in all of it to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I am like going to start pushing for, if it's in every battle and we can measure things like, what morality will be, like how much, bravery our troops will have, and we can know the economic costs and the tonnage costs and the civilian casualties. How much rape are they expecting? Let's get a number out there so that we're all okay with that number before we invade somewhere.
Kevin when we were talking about this, me and Kevin came up with a really interesting way to try and ask this question before people would go to like Gaza and be like, okay, are you sure you're willing to have people be raped?
Yeah, how much rape are you okay with?
Like, war and rape is such an intense correlate. There's such a huge connection with rape and war. Like, hey, if you go to war for this amount of days and you have this many people will most likely get raped.
Yeah.
Would that deter war from happening?
Right.
It's a hella interesting thing that Kevin and I accidentally came up with.
Yeah, it's been messing with my brain.
It's interesting.
The problem is it is real.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you have a war podcast. You realize that rape happens. All right. It's also important to mention here that Black Americans were doing the same work white people were doing, but segregation was still very much a thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this wasn't really the military. This was because of what life was like back in the United States. Because of the lifestyle that Americans had at home, the military assumed these men would not be able to work together. This couldn't be further from the truth. Units who were integrated had people of all colors, had higher morale, and were far more efficient. It was just a better unit when integration was a thing. This isn't to say that racism didn't exist. It definitely did. Excuse me, sorry. White people, white Americans, would get upset if they saw black men with British women. Fights would break out all the time over this, but this was a symptom of racist pieces of shit, regardless of who they where they're from or who they were. Like racist people are racist people. This is important to mention because although the majority of the units that are followed in this story are white, please understand that there were plenty of black pilots that were fighting for the United States and were just as brave and effective as any other pilot in the Army Air Force. Just want to take a moment to thank those of color who have served in the past and were treated differently because of the way that they looked. It saddens me that this is a conversation that we still have to have in 2024.
I know.
So yes, they obviously are cover in this story like more white people, but there were absolutely black pilots. Like that's important to know. I want that to be driven home. And that's why the show is going to be covering the Tuskegee Airmen because
which is great.
Yeah, because duh.
Because
right?
they need to.
Yeah.
It happened.
Duh. Yes.
Yeah, and there's just like interesting things going on in this time period because like before World War I, World War II, like phenology is really popular with,
What's phenology?
It's like the stupid shit where you think you can like see the bumps on your head and see how smart or dumb you are, right? So like I love the poet Walt Whitman, but he was kind of into phenology a little bit because it was the astrology of the time.
Okay.
But it's very race related, right? Very dumb. And then that kind of, I don't think there's like a clear line to it, but eventually the next like astrology, race related astrology, which is that's how I'm going to think of it for now. And it's race astrology, so it's just dumb.
Okay.
It's just dumb.
Okay.
Sorry for people that really like astrology. It's dumb. It's fine. You can do whatever you want in life, which is great.
Age of Aquarius.
But then it turns into eugenics, and we think of eugenics as like a Nazi thing, but like it was very popular in America. Just so we're clear,
Sacramento State had like an entire eugenics like
very popular.
Yeah.
And I understand the need to like smooth over the past to make it more digestible, but we were very much into eugenics. We had a Nazi party. We did not take like any Jewish refugees. We were asked to take them.
We turned them around.
Yes. So it's very in our culture at this moment still. Like we are still in race astrology moment.
Yes.
Which sucks.
It's
a slower process than any of us would like to.
Very depressing. So that being said, in the future, Kevin and I will absolutely be covering all black units such as the Tuskegee Airmen or the all black tank regiments in the Army. Y'all are heroes and need to be recognized accordingly.
We've talked about so many like specific ones that we've been looking at.
Yeah. I mean, coming up soon after this series, I'll be getting into some Native American stuff. Yeah. It's important that, Kevin and I don't want to be too white.
No.
You know what I mean?
Nope.
Anyway, other than that, this is kind of where we're going to be picking up next time on the Masters of the Air series.
Yeah.
That's where we're at.
And when we were talking about all the women that were helping out, they weren't all... It would be unfair to say they're all raped because it's also being taken advantage of or them trying to make the best decision they can in that situation. Because you had like straight up prostitutes, which that stuff was brutal. And then you also had... Well, those straight up prostitutes, what we were just talking about before the recording, which is just crazy, is they would walk up to the soldiers and they'd like touch their groin a little bit to kind of like, what's up, dude? And they would be able to figure out like which branch he was from and how much they could charge him and if he was an officer or enlisted. It was like super intelligent people.
Yeah.
And then I think one of the ones I was thinking of though was just that there were also girls that were just hungry and they're in London and they like they just wanted to like live a little bit and so like they would just want like literally they would buy them chocolate and dinner and then they would be it would have to happen after for them. Yeah.
I didn't get too much into it because we are a battle podcast, but this chapter was interesting because you learn about the hundreds of thousands of people that are on in England at the time.
Yeah, there's just a lot of people there.
There's a shit ton of people from all over the world helping the Allied forces. Yep. So super interesting. I guarantee you they'll be going into a lot of it on the show because that's where like the romanticism comes from.
Yep.
Like, ooh, we were in England and Europe and I fell in love with a girl and blah blah blah. Like that's where the like coziness comes from it.
Yep.
But it is a brutal fucking war. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Brutal. thank you so much for listening. We got some stuff coming up. Me and Kevin we already have our sights focused on our next series after this one. We're not going anywhere. Thank you to Ron for joining our Patreon. Our Patreon is in the bio link of this episode. Please join our Patreon. That would be extremely beneficial for us. We got some fun stuff on there.
Yes.
Please rate and review our show. Follow us on the social media. We got merch out. All that stuff is in the bio. Go check out some of our stuff. Go check out our website. Go do stuff, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have fun with life.
We appreciate the fuck out of you.
Absolutely.
This is legitimately, I other than things that involve my children and my wife, this is my favorite fucking thing. Kevin and I have become just the bestest of buddies doing this.
We hang out all day.
Fucking great. And we're only continuing to do this because you guys listen. As long as people listen, we're talking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else, man?
No. Just love everybody.
Love. Love, 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 love.
I could say that because Hitler doesn't exist anymore.
That's true. He
He's dead.
doesn't. He is dead. Yep. Well, on that note,
Yep.
thank you for listening. And until next time,
Bonsai!